Hearing of the independent inquiry into matters relating.
Just need 2 minutes just to take the distortion. That's my fault.
Good morning. This is an open hearing of the independent inquiry into matters relating to Afghanistan. The use of mobile telephones in the courtroom or annex is prohibited, save for a limited dispensation to the State Corps participant teams for the purpose of seeking instructions. Please could I ask you to ensure that all mobile telephones have been switched off or turned to silent. Please may I draw your attention to the fact that the Chair of the Inquiry, the Right Honourable Sir Justice Haddon-Cave, has made a restriction order in relation to this hearing. Copies of the restriction order are available on request, but in substance the order has made the following effect. This order restricts attendance in the courtroom of the open hearings scheduled to hear evidence about the deletion of material a UK Special Forces headquarters computer server known in these proceedings as ITS1. Attendance in the courtroom in which the hearing is to be held, namely Court 73, is restricted as follows. To members of the inquiry team and the recognised legal representatives of the Corps participants and the following witnesses when they are giving evidence. N5857, a contractor and the infrastructure engineer. N5858, a contractor and the manager of N5857. To members of the inquiry team and to the Corps participant recognised legal representatives only when the following witnesses are giving evidence. N5859, an officer in UKSF involved in information systems. N5595, who carries out internal investigation. Recognised legal representatives include the legal team assisting the recognised legal representative in the discharge of the recognised legal representative's functions. This order prohibits by restriction, publication or dissemination the identities of any of the witnesses listed in paragraph 2 above, or any information which might lead to their identification. The purpose of restricting attendance in the courtroom where the hearing is taking place is to protect both the witness's identity and this order. To ensure public access, a live video link of the hearing will be shown in the annex courtroom to which the public will have admittance. The live video link will not show the witnesses so that their physical appearance is concealed, but their evidence may be heard. In accordance with the General Restriction Order for Inquiry Hearings dated 23rd of October 2023, no person may disclose, publish or broadcast in any form or by any means anything that is said or done in the inquiry hearing room until 10 minutes after it takes place. Counsel to the inquiry or the solicitor to the inquiry must be informed of any request to make an application for a restriction order in relation to anything that has been said or done in the inquiry hearing room in the preceding 10 minutes. Anything that was said or done during that period will then be subject to a restriction order prohibiting its disclosure, repetition or duplication until the Chair has finally determined the application. Where such a request is made, the courtroom may be cleared for the Chair to consider whether there has been a breach of any restriction order, and both the live video link to the annex and the live stream YouTube recording will be temporarily stopped. Once the Chair has determined the matter enclosed, the live video link to the annex room and to YouTube will be recommenced. The Chair will confirm if a restriction order is to be made and what steps, if any, are to be taken to ensure compliance. The above orders are subject to a penal notice. This means that any breach of any element of the restriction orders may be certified to the High Court or the Court of Session, who will have the power to fine or imprison anyone found to have been in breach of the order.
Turn first of all to evidence that's going to be read. Part of it, with your permission, I'm going to actually read out in full. Other parts I'll draw your attention to and invite you to take as read without reading it out in full.
Thank you.
All of this evidence relates to a witness who's ciphered as N2311, who you may have heard mention of, sir, already. The first witness statement of N2311, which I'm going to read out, can be found at tab 36 in the hearing bundle, and it's the statement of N2311, signed and dated the 26th of May 2023. Yes. And it reads as follows. I, OF4 N2311, am making this statement in response to a Rule 9 request dated the 21st of March 2023, in which the chair of the independent inquiry relating to Afghanistan asked for, quote, a statement from the information manager or other appropriate person responsible for ITS1. The statement should include A, the current location of the ITS1 server, B, if it has been destroyed, when, where and on whose authority it has been destroyed, C, arrangements made for the backup of data from the ITS1 server prior to its decommissioning, D, the current location and accessibility of any such backup, E, their assessment as to the extent of data that was rendered unrecoverable from ITS1 in December 2016. I was employed as the SO1 Information Coherence between June 2015 and July 2017 on a full-time reserve service contract. This role is equivalent to the information manager referred to in the Rule 9 request. I was based in the Special Forces headquarters in London, and I was responsible for producing directives and standard operating instructions for the United Kingdom Special Forces. I was employed as a staff officer and do not have detailed technical expertise in the operation of computer systems. I reported directly to the Assistant Chief of Staff, J1J4, and that's N1805. And I managed 3 teams with responsibility for 1, information management, 2, information assurance, and 3, information exploitation. It's important to note that I was responsible for the information itself rather than the infrastructure upon which it was stored, and I explain my responsibilities below. A. Information management. Information management encompasses the processes employed by the Ministry of Defence to ensure that information is looked after in accordance with legislation and MOD policy. My team consisted an SO2, a headquarters information manager, and an information support officer. B. Information assurance. Information assurance is the practice of protecting against and managing all risks relating to the use, processing, storage and transmission of information or data and the systems and processes used for those purposes. My team consisted of an SO3 and a systems security officer. C. Information exploitation. Information exploitation is the process of understanding the value of existing information and using it to make informed decisions. My team consisted of an SO2 and a full-time net reveal analyzer subject matter expert. And this person was provided by Civilian Contractor 2 and could access external subject matter experts as required. I've previously provided 3 witness statements to the Royal Military Police relating to Operation Northmoor. Witness statement of N2311 dated the 15th of July 2016, 11th of May 2017, 18th of May 2017, and where relevant, I've produced some parts of my earlier witness statement in this comprehensive statement. The current location of the ITS1 server. ITS1 is a cipher which was assigned to the ITS1 servers, which were the UKSF Principal Information System. This system was used for the duration of Special Forces Headquarters Afghanistan from 2009 to 2014. There was a separate ITS1 system which stored above secret information. In my witness statement dated the 11th of May 2017, I explained my understanding of the various systems and backup processes that were operated by UKSF in the period 2009 to 2014. I am no longer employed within Special Forces Headquarters UK, and I have no knowledge about the current location of ITS1, and I do not know what has subsequently happened to the various backups and storage facilities that I describe in my statement of 11th of May 2017. I do not know whether the ITS1 servers have been destroyed or not. Certainly, at the time that I worked as SO1 Information Coherence, there were a number of backup processes and procedures that were operating, as I described in my statement dated 11th of May 2017. I recall that between July 2016 and January 2017, I was involved in various communications, email and in-person meetings with the Royal Military Police about their forensic access to ITS1 as part of the Operation Northmoor investigations. N1805 and S70, who's the Director of Special Forces, were also involved in these discussions. In parallel to the discussions with the Royal Military Police, I was involved in supervising the migration of ITS1 user information from legacy storage arrays to modern high-capacity storage facilities. This was a project that had been a long time in planning and was necessary to ensure the continued operational effectiveness of UK Special Forces. Civilian Contractor 1 was the prime contractor to the MOD for the preparation of the hardware/software prior to the hardware upgrade and transfer of information. On the 29th of July 2016, I was copied into an email from Warrant Officer Jim Pridden to the Chief of Staff of UKSF4, and that's a person we're referring to by the cipher IIA7, and the email referred to a meeting which had taken place and says, this is a quote, "I can confirm the timeline for the Afghanistan operations we are interested in is year given to 2013. Please confirm where the data resides and what systems. I've discussed the detail of the meeting with Captain Wright, Northmoor Team 1 Senior Investigating Officer, who agrees that working on your decommissioned data area in September 2016, after you've transferred the data to your new systems, is the best course of action, as long as you can confirm that no data will be deleted from the decommissioned system during that process." End quote. Even prior to this email, I was aware that the RMP did not want any data to be deleted from the ITS1 servers during the migration process. I was not aware that the migration process would involve the deletion of any information. Indeed, on the 29th of September 2016, I received an email from Captain Jason Wright seeking a number of specific assurances. On the 4th of October 2016, I sent an email to Captain Jason Wright, and in that email I explained that, and then this is another quote, "Regarding the insurances, RMP will require assurance that during the migration process that no data is changed, modified or deleted on the original storage. The precise details can be discussed with the relevant subject matter experts PRISM and N5859. Yes, we can provide this assurance. RMP will require assurance that when the original storage is presented to RMP, presumably 16th of November 2016, this will include the whole dataset, which includes all email communications and documentation set inclusive of any backup files that exist in any format whatsoever, brackets, noting that these may not be on this storage system but may exist in tape format, close brackets. Yes, we can provide this assurance. Upon receipt by RMP, the system should be live, powered on in its original state, so the data can be accessed by RMP technical staff. Having discussed this in more detail with Warrant Officer Pridden, we can make the following assurance. RMP will be present when the old storage is powered down. RMP will bag and tag the old storage. The extent of what needs to be retained for evidential purposes will be discussed at the pre-briefing. The evidence bags will then be stored until released to the RMP. I need to reiterate that while Special Forces Headquarters UK is the information owner, the hardware is owned by Civilian Contractor 1, and discussions to retain it beyond the project life must involve Civilian Contractor 1. That's the end of the quote. I did not possess detailed technical knowledge about the preparation/migration process. Accordingly, in providing these assurances, I relied on discussions I had with personnel at UKSF4. I cannot now recall who I spoke with at UKSF4. And sir, just pausing there in the reading, I'm sure you'll remember from Monday that witness N5859, when he gave evidence to the inquiry, said he was the person who provided those assurances to N2311, just to fill in that gap.
Thank you.
To continue with the witness statement. In late 2016 or early 2017, I became aware that between the 24th of June and 23rd of August 2016, N5857 and N5858, both Civilian Contractor 1 employees, utilised an application called SDelete on a number of storage drives. I've subsequently learned that this was done to optimise the drives in preparation for migration of user data to the new storage. This action was completed without my knowledge. I recall that on the 12th of January 2017, I attended a meeting with Lieutenant Colonel Harvey, who's the RMP Gold Commander Operation Northmore, N1805 and N2369. And at that meeting, it was decided that the commanding officer of UKSF4 should commission a unit investigation into the events surrounding the use of SDelete. I'm aware that an investigation was subsequently conducted and that on the 14th of February 2017, N5595 published the results of his investigation to ascertain the events surrounding the use of the SDelete application on the ITS1 storage area network storage arrays. As I explain above, at the time that I worked as SO1 Information Coherence, there were a number of backup processes and procedures that were operating as I described in my statement of the 11th of May 2017. I'm no longer employed as SO1 Information Coherence, and I do not know what has subsequently happened to the various backups and storage facilities that I described in my statement of 11th of May 2017. I was employed as a senior manager / supervisor and do not have detailed technical expertise in the operation of computer systems. Even at the time that I was employed as SO1 Information Coherence, I would not have possessed the technical expertise to provide a reliable assessment as to the extent of data that was rendered unrecoverable from ITS1 in December 2016. So continuing with N2311, that witness has provided 4 further statements. One is at tab 40, dated the 30th of May 2023. Another is at tab 32, dated the 15th of July 2016. Another is at tab 33, dated the 11th of May 2017, and there is an associated exhibit, reference ELR/1 at tab 34. And there is a further witness statement dated the 18th of May 2017 at tab 35. I'd invite you to take those as if they were read into the record without them being done so, and they can be, with your permission, published on the website in due course during today.
Thank you. So be it.
The next witness is the witness who, in fact, carried out the unit investigation we heard about today that was commissioned by 1805, and that's N5595, please. I think the witness should be waiting just outside.
Yes. Can the witness be brought in, please? Thank you. Do we need to cut the feed?
I think the feed might need to be cut just whilst the witness is walking in.
Can you cut the feed? Cameras are not live in the room, sir. Cameras not live. Thank you.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
I think it's right, for the purposes of your evidence, you're going to be known as N5595, is that correct?
That's correct.
I think just in front of you, you've got a red folder there. If you wouldn't mind opening the red folder and turning to tab 1. Could I have a red folder? And if you look down there, you should find a list of the various N numbers that we may need to refer to. Do you see N5595 there?
I do.
And is that your true name?
That is.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask for your help, please, with some documents and some activities that you conducted. I think you should have another bundle there. And if you turn to one headed tab 46, we should have a witness statement. Have you got that?
I do, yeah.
And is that the witness statement that you gave for the purposes of this inquiry? I think it says at the top, dated the 7th of September 2023, but is in fact signed when we look at the next page, the 8th of September 2023.
Yes, that's correct.
And is that witness statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is.
Thank you, sir. And I'd ask that that witness statement is entered into the record, please.
Yes.
And in that witness statement, you refer to, in fact, an inquiry that you conducted. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that inquiry took place, roughly speaking, in January 2017. Is that right?
I think it was February 2017.
Thank you. And in relation to that, you gave a witness statement to the Royal Military Police. Is that right?
That's correct.
And have you got that document in front of you? I think that should be in your tab 44.
Yes, I do.
And just so we can get the order of things right, your investigations in February 2017 or thereabouts, we can look at the precise date. And this witness statement, which you gave to the Royal Military Police, is dated the 11th of April 2017. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So I'd imagine events are going to be significantly better in your mind when you were giving this 2 months or so, or 3 months, 4 months after events.
That's correct. Yeah.
And I think you've had a chance to look over that witness statement And that witness statement is also true to the best of your knowledge and belief, is that right?
Yes, it is, yes.
Thank you. And so I'd ask for the same in relation to this detailed handwritten witness statement.
Yes, indeed.
So, we've heard that following an incident or a series of events where it was contended that some data may have been rendered irrecoverable or deleted, the CO of UK SF4 was to commission an internal investigation, a unit investigation. Is that right?
That's correct.
And were you the person who was commissioned, asked to carry out that investigation?
Yes, I was.
Thank you. Just want to deal with a few things really about you and your background, and they're contained in your witness statement that you gave to the Royal Military Police. At the time that you carried out this investigation, I think it says right at the bottom, you were, I think it's referred to as an OF2, which is sort of a NATO type of rank. Is that the equivalent rank of a captain?
That is, yes.
And you were, at the time, a captain serving within UKSF4, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So, I'm sure you're aware now that some of the individuals involved in the activities that were under investigation were also in UKSF4.
That's
Is that
right.
right? And one of the individuals in particular was N5859. And do you want to just have a look at the gist sheet, so you know exactly who that is? So first of all, do you agree that that N5859 was a person also in UKSF4?
That's correct.
And can I ask for your help? How well did you know N5859 before this?
I knew the individual more on a professional basis than personal.
Okay.
Work colleague.
So work colleague. Were you generally based at the same site or at different sites?
We were based at the same site.
Okay. So in terms of your professional day-to-day job and N5859's day-to-day job, how often would you see each other? Would it be sort of a daily basis, weekly basis?
I would say weekly.
Weekly. And in terms of out of the professional base of meetings or unit meetings, whatever, would you socialise with N5859?
If there was an organisation, a UKSF4 formal events, we would socialise, but outside of that, no.
Okay. And in terms of your relationship which you had with UKSF4, obviously you're both working for UKSF4, would you go as far to say N5859 was a friend, or not that far?
I wouldn't say friend, no.
And I think it's right, you can check the sheet there, N5859 certainly at the time that we're looking for was the same rank as you, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. N5857 is another name that we've heard about and in fact heard evidence from. Is that, and I think you've still got your gist sheet open, before you turn to do this particular investigation, did you know that person?
I did know that person, yes.
And in terms of how well you knew that person, is this someone you would work with professionally or otherwise?
Not really, no. We didn't work in the same department.
So would you have professional dealings with them from time to time, or would it just sort of be more someone you were aware of over a period of time from working in the organisation?
It was more a person that I knew from working in the organisation, not professionally.
And in terms of socialising, would you ever socialise with that person?
No.
N5858, is that a a person who you knew before this investigation?
No,
Not at all.
not at all.
Thank you. And finally, N2311. That a person that you knew?
Sorry, was that N2311?
N2311.
No, I don't know that person.
Is that a name that even rings a bell with you?
No.
No. Thank you very much. Next thing I want to ask you with is another part of UKSF called UKSF1. And if you wouldn't mind turning to tab 4, just so you're exactly clear who they're talking about. Do you see UKSF1?
Yes, I do.
Had you worked on occasion with people in UKSF1?
Yes.
Do you have, or have at the time, friends within UKSF1?
Yes.
Do you have or had friends in UKSF1 that, to your knowledge, have ever been of interest to Operation Northmoor or the Royal Military Police's investigations into activities in Afghanistan?
No.
So, can I turn now to a bit more detail about you, if I may? So, you say in your witness statement that at the time, and this is, I think, page 2, that at the time you were the RCMO of your unit.
That's correct.
Can you explain what's the RCMO?
The RCMO is the Regimental Career Management Officer.
Thank you. So, what does that mean in a sentence or two, please?
Effectively, the role of the Regimental Career Management Officer is to provide second-line career advice and guidance to the soldiers within UKSF 4 and their chain of command.
Thank you. You say in your witness statement you served with UKSF 4 for, I think it was 17 years, or you had at the time that you gave the witness statement to the Royal Military Police.
That's correct.
So would it be fair to say you had a good deal of knowledge as to the internal workings of UKSF 4?
Yes.
Were you involved in any way with the, had you worked before in any way with ITS1 other than as a user of ITS1?
As a user and also as a manager of ITS1.
Of ITS1. So you were familiar
Yes.
with that system. Were you familiar, for example, with the servers and the different types of servers there were?
Not particularly. I understood how ITS1 was configured, but I didn't have a deep technical understanding.
Now, you say in your witness statement that you are, that you put subjectively technically minded. I think as you've explained, you've worked with, obviously, on ITS1 and been a manager. Are you able to explain what you mean by that, just so we can understand, if we may, understand the extent of your technical knowledge?
At the time, I would say I was fairly technically minded. I held a number of technical roles within UKSF 4, and I had, I think, a good understanding of ITS1, but not to the level where I would be configuring it. I was more aware of the bigger picture of ITS1 and how it was used and where.
So, to take, in fact, a very specific example, a server migration, for example, for a whole system. If someone said, "Can you carry that out?" that would be something that would be beyond your expertise.
Yes, it would.
However, if I've got this right, you're saying if you were discussing technical details with people, you think you might be able to understand or take on board the points
Yes.
they would be making.
Were you familiar with the backups?
To a degree, yes.
What degree?
I was familiar that backups were conducted. I believe on a 24-hour basis. That was probably to the extent of my knowledge.
Thank you.
Now, one of the utilities piece of software that we know plays a part in it, or it's suggested, is S-Delete. Is that a utility that you'd heard of before this investigation?
It wasn't, no.
Now, this was a unit investigation. Had you carried out before this any sort of similar type of investigation or inquiry for UKSF4, or in fact in any other role, or was this the first time you'd done something like this?
I believe this was the first one I was asked to do.
Thank you. And we know that UK Armed Forces, and I mean that in its broadest, have many courses available. Is there a specific course or qualification that a person's meant to go on before doing this, or did this fall within more general duties of an officer?
I'm not aware of a specific course that an individual would do. This was more a directed task.
Now, you mentioned in your witness statement that you were chosen by the COC, the chain of command, due to your impartiality with the event. So I want to ask you about that statement. You weren't involved, were you, with the server migration?
No.
The selection of any tools, or how it should be done?
No, I wasn't.
So in terms of impartiality with the event, what had happened, your evidence to this inquiry is you played no part in that whatsoever.
No, that's
Were
correct.
you even aware that there was a new server being commissioned, or not?
I may have been aware. I can't really recall.
Okay. In terms of impartiality with people, appreciate to an extent it's always difficult when you're taking a step back. Did you feel that you were in a position to be impartial about the accounts that you were going to receive from various people?
Yes, I believe so.
And part of it, depending on how your investigation was to end up, and if you could put yourself back to the point at the start, a potential conclusion might have been that things had gone wrong, and a potential conclusion might have been that UKSF4 had not dealt with things well. I'm talking about as a theoretical option from that. Would you have had, if that was your view, any qualms about setting that out?
No, not at all.
And in terms of the 17 years that you had been a part of UKSF before, how did that feature in? Would, if that arose, make it easier for you to say that, or less easy, or play no part?
I don't think it played any part.
Thank you. So, going to ask you, please, about the RMP investigation and your knowledge of that investigation, if that makes any sense. So, you were, I think, made aware that there was an RMP investigation, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And first of all, did you know what the RMP investigation was about?
I believe it referred to Operation Northmoor.
Yep, that's the name of the operation. Did you know what Operation Northmoor was investigating?
Yes.
What did you understand that Operation Northmoor was investigating?
I believe it was looking into potential allegations of illegal activities in Afghanistan.
Yeah, and sorry to push you on it, but did you know the type of illegal activities that were being looked at?
Yes.
And so, to be absolutely blunt, you were aware that the investigations included allegations of extrajudicial killings,
Yes.
effectively executions of prisoners.
Yes.
So you must have been aware, that being the case, that this was obviously a very serious matter
Yes.
for those involved, for the reputation of UK Special Forces, and for the whole British Army,
Yes.
and potentially even the country.
Correct.
And were you aware that the ITS1 server was of interest to that investigation?
Not until I was asked to conduct the
But at that point, you became aware there's this Operation Northmoor, the alleged or the suspected killings, and the server was considered to be relevant to that.
Yes.
And were you told that an undertaking, don't mean that necessarily in the legal sense of an undertaking, but it had been agreed that that server would be preserved and something might have gone wrong?
I wasn't aware that it had been preserved.
I'm sorry, perhaps I didn't put that very well. Were you aware that the RMP had been told by UKSF4 that the server would be preserved for them?
I wasn't aware of that.
You weren't aware that that assurance had been given?
Call that.
No problem. And so when you were told, well, there's suggestions something's gone wrong or data's been deleted, you weren't aware that was in the context of a promise or an agreement being made, that something like that would not happen?
I was not aware of any promises or assurances that were given.
If you had been aware of that, always difficult with hindsight, do you think that might have changed your approach in any way?
Sorry, if I'd been aware that assurances were being given that the
Data
ITS1 server...
would not, for example, I think we'll come to it later, that some data was deleted or rendered irrecoverable. If you're aware that a promise had been given, that was something that would not happen, and that promise had been given to the RMP, would that have changed the way you approached your investigation?
No.
Would you think it might have made the circumstances more serious?
I don't believe so. From my personal opinion.
Now, you're going in to look at this. Did you have an open mind?
Yes, I did.
And so, one end you might have nothing's happened at all, in fact, and I suppose at the other end of the scale, deliberate wrongdoing.
Yes, they were, I guess, the scales of what could have happened.
Thank you. Now, you prepared a report, is that right?
That's correct.
And I think you've got that report in tab 45, and I'm going to ask that to be brought up to the screen, please. And you can look at it in the paper copy. It's just so others sitting in another room can see it as well. So, this is a document in the standard military format. This inquiry has become more used to. Could us flick on to, that's the first page. Can we flick on to the second page just for a moment, please? That's the entire report, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And we can see it's a page and a half, page and a quarter. And at the bottom we can see, well, in fact, it's been blocked out for ciphering, but that's your name typed, is that right?
That's correct.
And we can see it says you've been given a title. The role you were doing was the RFQ28 S-Delete Investigating Officer. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. So can we turn back to the first page, please? And we can see it's got reference A, and that's it's called metadata loss. We've actually seen this document. It's a document as it sets out there from a lawyer, effectively saying there should be an investigation. Do you remember why the term metadata, how the term metadata loss first arose?
I don't, no.
Because as far as you're aware, this wasn't really about metadata, was it?
Not specifically. I think it was more wider data, not just...
It was about data loss, wasn't
Yeah.
it, rather than
Yeah.
metadata?
Yes.
There we go. And so we can see, in accordance, you've got your introduction, in accordance with reference A, a unit investigation was conducted, that's by you, and again, you're writing this in the third person, which is the proper format for doing this sort of thing,
Yes.
to ascertain the events surrounding the use of the S-Delete application on the ITS1 storage area network storage arrays. And to assist with the investigation, the following people were interviewed on the 19th of January 2017. Okay? Right. Now, you can see at the top of the report is dated the 14th of February 2017. So we've got to bear in mind there's 3 weeks or so between the interviews and your submission of this final report. So the interviews on the 19th of January 17, are we right to say they all therefore took place on that day?
Yes.
And that's the entirety of the people that you interviewed for this investigation?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. And we can see the interviews took place in the UK SF4 data centre, is that right?
That's correct.
And the people that you spoke to, interviewed, did you speak to them separately or were they all together?
I seem to recall we were all together in a single room.
So again, just to try and understand sort of how it took place. You were there, we weren't, I presume, did you send an email saying I need to talk to you, or you just sort of wandered in and saw who was around?
I can't quite remember that detail, but I would have emailed the individuals concerned and identified a date and a time and a location that suited their availability to conduct.
That suited their availability?
Their availability, yes.
And was this, you were in what, some sort of meeting room or conference room, something like that?
Yes, a meeting room.
And so are we to understand that there's, obviously you're there, did you have an assistant or anything like that, or was it just you that was doing this?
It was just me.
Right. And so then all of these people there.
Can I just check?
Yep, please do.
N5862.
Yep, please do.
I can't quite recall whether 5861 was present,
Right.
but I'm going to assume that that individual was, because of how I've written it in the report, but it was quite a long time ago.
Okay. So, in fact, with your help, we can see this. When it says at 2, the interview took place, and you put interview rather than interviews, perhaps my assumption, there was one effectively single interview, is that right?
That is correct.
Right. Okay. So you're there, and then we have, I was going to say all of the people, you have a slight reservation perhaps about N5861, but they're all there together.
Yes.
Before adopting this procedure makes it sound something a bit more than it is, before deciding this is what you were going to do, did you think of any other options or take any advice on the best way of doing it?
No, I didn't.
And again, appreciating hardness to sort of go back over decisions you made a while ago, why was it that you decided to do it in this particular way?
It may have been detailed in reference A.
Yep.
I can't quite remember the detail or any specific instructions within that document, but I would have wanted to ascertain the who, what, why, when, and
Yep.
this would have seemed the most appropriate way to do that.
Now, going back to what we were talking about just a bit ago, you're going into this, as you said, with an open mind. And on one hand, you've got nothing happened or total accident. And appreciate there's a very wide scale. And at the other end, you've got deliberate misconduct, effectively, which would be, in this context, deliberately deleting information that was of potential relevance to police investigating very, very serious allegations. Did you give any thought to the method of the interview, as in sort of having everyone sitting around the table with you, as to how that would assist your investigation?
I would have thought that that would have been the best approach, to have everyone that was concerned with this together to talk through the detail.
And can you set out what you thought were the advantages, or what you think now are the advantages of that approach?
I think time was probably an advantage. I could speak to everyone concerned in one go. And I probably have more accurate description of the events and the reasons behind it from everyone concerned in one room, as opposed to speaking to them individually.
And looking at it, what are the disadvantages of that approach, if any, so far as you're concerned?
I can't think of any disadvantages.
Could I suggest a potential disadvantage for your view or your opinion? If there had been anything ranging from misconduct, as in someone not following the procedures, if you see what I mean, that they were meant to follow, so sort of perhaps just a little bit up the scale from accident, say mistake or error, as we move up to perhaps serious misconduct, to deliberate misconduct or perverting the course of justice, do you think there might be disadvantages with everyone giving their accounts in front of each other?
Yes, I believe that could be a disadvantage.
Because, first of all, their accounts might be contaminated.
Potentially.
Because they're hearing, and it genuinely or inadvertently alters their own recollection of events, hearing from what someone else has said.
I suppose that could be considered.
Or there could be collusion.
Yes.
Yes. Or there could even be inadvertent or deliberate pressure put on other people.
Yes, I imagine there could be.
Especially when we've got, looking at the people, the titles there, people of different ranks and positions, if I can put it that way.
Yes.
And did you consider that potential disadvantage before
I
carrying
don't think
out
I did, no.
Given, as you say, there's a range of options going in it with an open mind, on reflection, might it have been better to speak to these people separately?
On reflection, perhaps, for the reasons you've just described.
And weighing into that, feeding into that maybe it's likely, maybe it's not at one end, potentially very serious allegations.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Potentially at one end, very serious
Yes.
allegations, very serious behaviour. Right.
Would it be fair to say that this wasn't really an interview, it was a discussion?
Yes, it probably was more like a discussion, I suppose.
And in fairness, the word that the chair has just picked up, that's one you use, I think, at page 4 of your witness statement. You say, through my discussions with the technical experts, it was explained to me that S-Delete will not delete live data. When you say discussions, this is quite literally a discussion with everyone around rather than separate discussions. Yes?
Yes, that's correct.
So I'm going to ask you in a minute about some individual accounts that people gave or may not have given to you. But one of them, but first of all, I think it's right, you took some notes, is that right?
That's correct.
And in what or on what did you take your notes?
I can't say 100%, but I would have likely taken them in my notebook that I had at the time.
Now, I think you say at the end of the witness statement that you will provide those notes to the Royal Military Police. Did you, in the end, in fact, provide your original notes to the Royal Military Police?
I can't recall that.
In terms of your notebooks, obviously one option is that it was in fact provided to the military police, but say in the event that it wasn't provided to the Royal Military Police, would those notes be retained, or was that sort of more of a personal type of notebook that wouldn't be?
It was a personal notebook. They would have been retained for the time that I had the notebook and then would have been destroyed.
Destroyed. So we've got And when you gave the witness statement to the Royal Military Police, did you have your notebook with you then? Do you remember, or were you giving the account from memory?
I can't remember. It's likely I would have had.
At the time you spoke to the Royal Military?
Likely, but I can't remember.
Right. And you can't remember whether or not you gave that to the Royal Military Police? So, can I ask you, we've heard from a number of witnesses about S-delete and how it works. There's a few items from your report I'd like to ask for your help with in detail, please. Do you see paragraph 5 of the document we've got up in front of you?
Yes.
So it says here, upon returning to UKSF4, the earlier paragraph for context, as you can see, is the course that they went on. And in fact, we've seen records about that course. You go on to say in your report, upon returning to UKSF4, N5857 utilised the S-delete application on a number of SAN storage drives to optimise the source drives in preparation for RFQ28 and the migration of user data to the new 3-pass storage. This work was conducted between the 24th of June and the 23rd of August 2016. Brackets, locally produced records are available to support this. Can you assist, please? What were those locally produced records?
I can't remember seeing these locally produced records. It's likely that they would have been either recorded in a handwritten logbook, perhaps, or as part of a digital kind of statement of work, perhaps.
So, just looking at the text, and I'm not trying to do a fine textual analysis of a document you were obviously typing through a long time ago, but when it says locally produced records are available, that's obviously capable of a number of different interpretations. Did you look at those records yourself?
I don't think I did, no.
So you obviously were relying, therefore, on what somebody else told you to say that those records were available. And again, maybe you didn't anticipate when you were writing this that a few years on you'd be giving evidence somewhere like this.
Absolutely.
But again, perhaps with the benefit of hindsight, given the allegation of deletion data took place in the context of a police investigation into executions, might your investigation have been more thorough if you had actually looked at those records yourself?
It would have been more thorough had I looked at those locally.
Do you recall who it was that told you about that?
I believe it would have been N5857
Okay.
or N5595
Take your time.
or N5859,
N5859.
but likely N5857, because that was the individual that conducted this piece of work and would have made those records.
So I was going to ask if you can just have a quick look at a document, please. And I think it may not be one that you've seen before. So I'm just going to ask, the contents of tab 2 is handed to the witness. So this is an email from N5859, okay? So the person right at the top on there. Now, please ignore the date, what looks like the date at the top. We know that's wrong for various reasons. And before you were invited to be involved as the investigating officer, there'd been already some inquiries made. And this is a document, a copy of an email that N5859 produced to their chain of command, okay? Setting out what they'd found out from their investigations or whatever they'd done. Would you mind just having just a glance at that for a second? And the question I'd like your help with, please, is whether you were ever provided that or not.
I don't believe I was ever provided this. I don't recall seeing this before.
And you're carrying out, obviously, an investigation to try and draw your conclusions. Would it have been of assistance if you were provided with, if you like, accounts that people had given in relation to this before, that sort of thing?
I've not had a chance to read through the document completely. It may have provided additional context.
I mean, would you agree, taking a step back as a matter of principle, it's going to help you, isn't it? If you've got the more information that you're given, it's going to help, isn't it?
I think it's fair to assume the more information I had would have assisted me.
I'm not going to ask you any more questions about that document. If you want to have a look through it, if you think there's anything that you need to mention, please feel free, and we can wait a moment, as I said, but I'm not going to ask you anything particular about that. Thank you very much. So I want to ask you a bit, please, about some of the detailed or perhaps more information you were able to provide about the accounts that these people named gave. And then I just want to ask you about some of your conclusions, and then that'll be it. So one of the people that you mention at 2D in your report is N5861. Which you put as the CC1 Service Delivery Manager.
That was N5861, did you say?
5861, yeah. It's at 2D, where you mentioned one of the people you've interviewed. It's just back on the same tab 45. Back to that one. And just looking at your 5861 is not a person we've heard a lot about in hearings so far. I think in your witness statement to the RMP at page 6, you say 5861 is the Service Delivery Manager for CC1, yep. And in your witness statement, I'm just reading it out exactly, it's at page 6, you say, I understand he's the line manager for N5857 and had no role in the deleted data.
That's correct.
And that's, I presume, is based on what you learnt from them all sitting around the table.
Yes, that would be correct.
So then we've got D as well, which is another person we've not heard a great deal about in these so far. N5862, which you've got down as CC4 contractor, okay, which is perhaps a subtly different type of organisation, a different contractor. And again, in your witness statement, page 6 of 8, you say they had no role in the deleted data. Yeah?
That's correct.
So based on what you're saying, and in fact what everyone else said, whilst those are two people who, I'm sure quite rightly, you thought it right to speak to or see what they had to say, it seemed generally agreed that they had nothing to do with it. Is that right?
That's correct.
Right. So then we've got 5857. Yeah. 5858 and 5859. Yep. And 5857 and 5858 are civilian contractors, is that right? The third and fourth line engineers.
That's correct.
And we know 5859 is the captain, same rank as you, who in fact I think was the project manager
That's correct at the time.
for the transition. Now you set out in your witness statement a bit more detail about storage arrays, about the training course. Then we come to what's really your you explain how S-Delete works, and as you say on page 2 of your report, there is no evidence to suggest that any data not already deleted by the users was deleted during this work. Okay?
That's correct.
Now, we then come to your summary, okay, which is the last paragraph. And again, without meaning to pick your staff work apart, it's a fairly short document already, isn't it?
Yes.
And this might be a bit more of a conclusion than a summary. So it does repeat various parts that you've set out before about this being recommended and so on, and the intention to optimize the storage arrays to reduce data migration times. And it's just the very last sentence that I'm going to ask you a bit more about, which says this: the work was conducted as part of the CC1 on-site engineer contracted support duties, and was therefore conducted without the awareness or oversight of the military chain of command.
That's correct.
Okay? That's your finding. Thank you. And if you wouldn't mind turning to the witness statement you gave to the Royal Military Police, it's the very last page, page 8. Have you got that there?
I do, yes.
And then if you go from sort of halfway down, we can see, and this isn't a criticism of you at all, please don't think it is, we've got the exact same words in the witness statement, all right? And I'm sure it would have been the officer from the RMP who's writing the witness statement, so he's obviously used those same words. I'm sure you had your report there. But then there's another paragraph, do you see at the end, starting "this would"?
Yes.
Would you mind just reading that? So it finishes, on-site engineer contracted support duties and was therefore conducted without the awareness or oversight of the military chain of command. Your witness statement adds some further information about that. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it says, this would be a routine task whereby it would not necessitate oversight for the military chain of command because N5857 is part of the CC1 support and was carrying out his tasks as part of the ITS1 Life Extension Programme. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And was that your finding?
Yes.
Right. What was it that led you to think this was a routine task?
My understanding was that the use of the S-Delete application is part of a known process for preparing storage arrays or hard drives for transferring of data.
In fairness, and again, I'm not trying to nitpick or unfairly nitpick, that's not what the witness statement says. It's a routine task, which makes it sound like this is something that happens all the time. If I told you that it's the evidence of N5857 and N5858, this was the first time they'd ever used S-Delete, and that N5859 had not even heard of it, would that surprise you?
No, that wouldn't surprise me. The transfer of data from one storage area to another, this was, in my understanding, the only time that happened on ITS1.
So if it was, again, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut off your answer. If that was the only time this had happened, would that not suggest it was in fact not routine?
Perhaps the word routine was not the best choice of words. Even though it wasn't routine in the frequency it had happened, I understood that the use of S-delete as part of this process was standard practice, not necessarily on ITS1, but the use of that tool for the migration or preparation of hard drives for moving data would be fairly routine. It was a freely available tool within that system, or any other system that uses the same operating system.
I mean, you've been in UKSF for 17, then for UKSF 4, I think you said for 17 years. Then you've got obviously a degree of technical knowledge. Just taking a step back, you knew, or certainly knew then what S-delete did, which involves potentially irreversible changes to data arrays. Yes?
Yes.
And ITS1, we've heard, was an important system. Were you not thinking, if this is what you were being told, this doesn't sound right to me? Someone really should be signing off on this.
My reason behind that was my understanding of the S-delete application is that it only deletes previously deleted information. It doesn't delete data or information that hasn't already been deleted.
Yep.
So therefore, I think my thought at the time was, well, that very reason, it didn't delete any data that hadn't already been deleted by other users.
Now, in terms of the part that you say that this work was conducted and was conducted without the awareness or the oversight of the military chain of command, it may be a difficult question now. Do you remember who it was who said that?
That it hadn't.
Yeah.
I think that was my understanding of it.
No, sure. But it's obviously, I say obviously, it's a matter for the chair, maybe an important, one of the things, who, what, where. What was your source of the information that the chain of command weren't aware of this?
It was likely, it was either an assumption on my part, or it was N5859 may have said that they were unaware that this had happened, but I can't recall that, I'm afraid. I think it's more likely it was my assumption.
Right. Now, when you say awareness or oversight of the military chain of command, because there's lots of different chains of command, and we've heard about that the contracting arrangements, as you'd expect perhaps with a large IT project, aren't all that straightforward. Just so we're clear on that, is what you're saying that N5859 was unaware and all effectively the military lot were unaware this stayed within civilian contractor? Is that what you were trying to get across?
I believe that was a point I was trying to make, yes.
And are you able to recall with any degree of confidence whether anybody in the discussion actually said that, or whether that was an assumption that you reached?
Can't recall anybody stating that. I feel now it's likely that that was the assumption I made from the interview I held with these individuals.
Looking back on it again with the benefit of hindsight, and appreciate you're here giving evidence, might it have been an idea to test that assumption?
Yes, I think that's fair to say.
Because that assumption, and in in fairness, when you read your Estelite report, it's not qualified. I therefore infer, or it's my assumption, it's written as a statement of fact, isn't it?
Yes.
That's the statement of fact that exonerates UKSF4, really. Would you agree?
I don't know if I'd use the word exonerate.
Okay.
But
what word would you use?
yeah, perhaps exonerate is the right word.
If, and this isn't something that was in your knowledge, if there had been some deliberate source of deliberate misbehaviour or of any sort, would you agree that from the way that your investigation was carried out, having people together, not checking some of the records and making some assumptions, your investigation wasn't really ever going to be able to find that out, was it?
I think that's fair to say.
And someone relying on your report would then gain, obviously up to them, perhaps a false degree of assurance as to the amount of depth that matters have been looked into. Is that fair?
I don't recall anyone coming back to me and questioning the level of detail that I provided in my report or asking me to conduct additional interviews. So I would have believed from that the level of degree that I had investigated or met with the requirements of reference A, that was suitable, acceptable.
Okay. So N5858, just take you a minute to look at him. I just want to raise with you to give you the opportunity to deal with it if you feel able to. N5858 has told this inquiry that before S-delete was used, the permission of the customer, and in this case the customer is UKSF4, was gained.
Okay.
Is that something that you found out in your inquiry?
I don't remember that. I think if I was aware that specific permission had been gained from somebody in the military chain of command within UKSF for the use of the S-delete application, it would have reflected in my report. I wouldn't have used the words that I used in my final summary.
I think in fairness, your evidence before was that you didn't actually ask about the chain of command. That was an assumption you made.
I can't quite remember, I'm afraid.
Right. In terms of N5857, again, just to give you the opportunity to comment and deal with it if you can. N5857 it explained again that they received permission through a ticketing system.
Okay.
To have this done. Does that ring a bell? Just in terms of the ticketing system, or him telling you that?
The term of ticketing system makes sense, yes.
And it's the evidence of N5857 that when he met with you, he told you this, and that there was permission given from UKSF. Did N5857 tell you that, in summary, permission was given from the military chain of command?
I don't remember that.
Is it possible
It's possible.
that he told you that?
It's possible. I don't remember him telling me that.
Now, and just almost the last thing, we can see that your report was dated the 13th of February 2017.
Sorry, what was that date?
Your report is dated the 14th of February 2017, yet the interviews took place on the 19th of January 2017. Again, appreciating the difficulty, is there a reason for that time gap?
I don't recall there being a reason for that time gap. And when I reread this, I was surprised at that time gap. I thought I would have written this summary, this report, a bit earlier. There must have been other priority work that I had at the time, perhaps.
Just give me one moment. Looking back now, do you think your report fulfilled the objective of an investigation? Do you think you achieved those aims again?
Without having reference A to refer back to see if there was any specific instructions that I had to fulfil, yes, I still believe that the investigation I carried out
It's a tab 42.
Yep.
was suitable.
I'm just going to ask that you be given tab 42 because we've got that reference. Thanks very much. And I'm sorry, it's probably my fault for not giving you this earlier because we do have that document. I'll give you just a moment to look at it.
Yes, upon reading reference A again, I believe that the report that I completed and handed in did meet the objectives of.
Thank you very much. Sir, do you have any questions?
Just one or two. You told Mr. Polnay that you were aware of Operation Northmoor at the time, and you told him that you were aware how serious the allegations were in Operation Northmoor, and that they involved allegations of extrajudicial killings. We see in Annex A, which you reference in your report, in the first paragraph, that the Esterleak program had been run across old data storage area. You can see that in the first sentence. And then if you'd like to look at the second sentence,
Sorry, is this in my report?
No, this is Annex A, which you've just been handed.
Oh, sorry.
All right. Would you like to look at the first paragraph again? First sentence refers to the fact that the contractor had caused metadata loss from ITS1 by running a program called sdelete across the old data storage area. Then it goes on. The deleted metadata includes information that related to operations in Afghanistan, which Operation Northmoor is currently investigating. You said earlier to Council that your thought at the time was, well, sdelete didn't delete any data that hadn't already been deleted by other users. But as you see here from Annex A, it makes plain, doesn't it, that the deleted metadata included information that related to operations in Afghanistan. So do you still think that your approach to this report met the requirements of reference A? If your thought at the time, well, it didn't delete any data that hadn't already been deleted, that wasn't the point, was it? It appears from Annex A that you were being asked to address.
I still believe that the investigation that I conducted, without any previous experience or training in conducting unit-level investigations, answered. I look now at paragraph 1, the last sort of last half of the last sentence that says they would require a statement explaining how and why the metadata was removed from the system. I believe that my subsequent statement I provided answered that. But in hindsight,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Polney. Thank you very much for coming to give your evidence. You're free to go.
So the next witness, I understand, will be Brigadier Cansdale, and that's to be given completely in an open type hearing with a delay. And I think they'll, if you wouldn't mind rising, please, sir, for a few minutes so that there can be a reconfiguration in some of the equipment.
Indeed. We'll give the shorthand writer a break. Let's reconvene, shall we, at 25 to 12. Is that all right? Thank you. Miss Broom.
Thank you, sir. The next witness is Brigadier Cansdale.
Brigadier, can you come into the witness box, please? Thank you.
I'd like to repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Brigadier Cansdale, please could we start by you giving us your full name?
Matthew Timothy Cansdale.
Thank you very much. You are a serving officer in the British Army, is that right?
Correct.
And you are currently the commander of the Army's collective training group, which is based at the Land Warfare Centre in Warminster.
Yes.
In front of you, you have a bundle, and in that bundle there is a witness statement and a selection of exhibits, is that right?
Yes.
Dealing first with your witness statement, did you provide a witness statement at the request of the inquiry dated the 15th of September 2023?
Yes.
And is that the witness statement you have in front of you?
It is.
It's 37 pages long with an appendix at the end. Is that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is.
Thank you. Sir, can I ask that that's admitted into the record, please?
Indeed, thank you.
I'm going to turn to the contents of your witness statement in due course, but can we start, please, with your experience, which is set out at paragraph 2 of your witness statement?
Yes, so I commissioned into the Parachute Regiment in 1998. I've served my regimental duty as all been with the Parachute Regiment. It's included tours in Northern Ireland, Sierra Leone, Iraq, and 4 tours in Afghanistan.
Thank you. Can I ask you, and it's my fault, can you slow down? There is a stenographer taking a live transcription of this, and the quicker you speak, the harder it is. It's normal, don't worry, but if we speed up again, I'll stop you.
We've got plenty of time.
Sir?
You said there were 4 tours you completed in Afghanistan. Were they January to April 2002, when you were Company Second in command of the B Company 2nd Battalion in the Parachute Regiment? That was in Kabul. June, September 2008, when you were the Officer Commanding A Company of the 3rd Battalion of the Parachute Regiment, and then you were at Regional Battle Group South, based at Kandahar Airfield, but operating across southern Afghanistan. Your next tour was September 2010 to April 2011, and then you were Officer Commanding the Task Force Helmand Brigade Reconnaissance Force, based at Camp Bastion, but again operating across Helmand. And then finally, September 2014 to March 2015, you were Staff Officer, so 1 level, in ISAF HQ in Kabul.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. The witness statement you have provided is going to deal with 3 topics. That's operational staff work, consequence management, and operational record keeping together with specialist advisors. Is that right?
Correct.
Could I ask you, please, to turn to the executive summary of your witness statement, which starts at paragraph 7. The matters you're going to explain to us, they're all in respect of UK conventional forces.
That's correct.
We know that special forces sometimes have slightly different procedures, and you're here to speak about conventional forces.
Correct.
To be clear, you've not served with UK Special Forces at any time during your career,
Nope.
and their practices and procedures, therefore, are beyond the scope of your personal experience.
Correct.
When you've provided your witness statement, you've sought to focus on the types of operational activity that are central to the inquiry's terms of reference. Is that right?
That's correct.
So, therefore, that's the planning, conduct and recording of deliberate operations by the combat arms and post-incident management of possible civilian casualties. So looking at deliberate operations that are planned, and then also the after effects where there may have been civilian casualties.
Correct.
Thank you very much. We're going to start then with operational staff work, and if we start, please, with paragraph 11 of your witness statement. You've set out in your witness statement what operational staff work means. Can you explain, please, what operational staff work is, OSW for short?
So OSW is a broad term used to describe any and all of formal, written, graphical products that are generated and used in the course of a military deployment.
Okay,
I can go on if you wish.
I was going to say, so first of all, it's written work, but it describes the work of Army staff.
Yes, so of the staff of planning, conduct of operations and deployments.
Thank you. And if you could carry on.
So historically it was based on the staff, but it is now used as a general sense to describe material produced at all levels of command. And this has increased often with the ubiquity of computers in the field, which has changed the nature of the recording of operational staff work.
Is there a single standalone definition of what operational staff work is?
No, there is not. It covers multiple things, including products for planning and orders, and for other things, for example, PowerPoint briefs for introduction to theatre.
Does it also include overall record keeping?
Record keeping would be part of where OSW went to, as opposed to being intimately connected.
If we think about it like this, and tell me if I've misunderstood, but operational staff work is used in order to plan an activity or to organise an activity. So, for example, a deliberate operation. Is that right?
That is correct.
So you've got your OSW going in, as it were, to the activity. The activity is then conducted, and then there's staff work afterwards, which would be the reports, the returns, and the record keeping.
Absolutely.
Is that a fair description of it?
It is.
Operational staff work, does it vary according to the type of document or graphic concerned?
Yes, it does. It takes many forms depending on the type of operation and often the level of headquarters at which it's being conducted.
So there'll be different formats for higher headquarters compared to down on the ground at subunit level, for example?
Absolutely.
Are there often pro formas or forms, guidance offered in terms of completion of specific types of OSW?
Yes, you would expect to see templates and forms to aid the compilation of OSW.
And is that, so there's essentially a standardised format which will allow all those who need to understand it to understand it?
Yes.
Operational staff work can prescribe action, so it can tell someone to do something, is that right?
Yes, in the form of orders.
It could set further tasks. So the example you gave in your statement is an intelligence assessment when an operation is being planned.
Yes.
Or work produced to enable subsequent steps along a plan to be taken.
Yes.
Reports and returns. This is at your paragraph 15. What are reports and returns, please?
So reports and returns consist of communications, really, between lower and higher headquarters, going both ways, and would form part of OSW, and could be very rapid and incident-based, or could be a programmed report and return that's due, say, every 24 hours.
So there's different types of reports and returns. There are those which are required because something has happened, so an incident on an operation, for example, and there's those which are set to a routine and provided as part of the ongoing deployment.
That's right.
So, for example, there could be daily reports, weekly reports, end of deployment reports, post-operational reports, those sorts of documents.
Absolutely.
And you explained they go from bottom to top, as it were, and up and down.
Yes, people would normally think of them as going bottom to top. You also get what we would call a down rep, where it's coming back down the other way.
And is that a way of making sure that everybody who needs to understand what is happening on the deployment or on the ground is aware, whether that be the individuals on the ground or those at the higher headquarters?
Yes.
Turning to the staff branches, so those who would generate the staff work, you've explained at paragraph 16 the functional areas of activity, which we've heard a little bit about, but I'm just going to ask you to rehearse. And dealing with the joint environment as opposed to the single service, it's the J prefix. And is it J1 to 9?
That's right.
And that's how activity is organised, and there will be individuals who work within those particular areas. Is that right?
Yes.
J1 is what, please?
So J1 covers personnel and administration.
J2?
Intelligence and security.
J3?
Operations.
J4?
Medical and logistics.
J5?
Planning.
J6?
Communications.
J7?
Training.
Is training an overarching description? Are other things often included in J7, such as force development?
Training as part of force development,
So-
could include it in there.
Okay. And J9, would that be policy, legal and media?
That's right, with J8 being finance.
Sorry, I'd missed out the money. Is there a crossover sometimes between operations and planning, often termed J35?
Yes, so we talk about J35 as a joint branch to help a plan go from a planning staff into a delivery staff, as it were.
So there's a close connection between those two areas when planning an operation and executing an operation.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Do certain document types relate to certain J areas? So, for example, personnel reports, as you've set out in your statement, would relate to J1 and the personnel section?
Yes, absolutely. And then it flows from the description of that J title. So you'd expect J2 to be doing intelligence reports, assessments, for example, J4 to be about planning of logistics.
So just looking at how you identify this, if we saw an email address with a J number in it, so J35 campaigns, we would know just looking at that email address that that person is involved in the planning and organisation of operations on that joint J35 task.
Correct.
Are there pieces of operational staff work which contain input from across the branches?
So, yes, there are. And the examples given in terms of personnel reports for J1 are one way of doing it, but you'd expect an overarching document to contain elements from all of those areas.
And is it the case that the further up the headquarters you go, so the higher headquarters, the more involvement there will be across the branches?
Yes, so at the lowest level, you'd expect all those functions to some degree to be vested in a very small number of individuals. In a higher headquarters, you might expect to have each of those staff branches represented separately, perhaps by more than one person.
So if we take battle group level, is that the lowest level at which the various staff branches might be represented individually?
Yes.
And once you get lower than that to subunit or perhaps small task forces deployed at a forward operating base or somewhere like that, they would have those functions vested in one or two individuals?
Absolutely.
In terms of a battle group, what does a battle group mean in this context? What size are we dealing with?
So a battle group might consist of, say, up to 1,000 people, be commanded normally by a lieutenant colonel with a team of staff.
In the Afghanistan context, a battle group was often and I hope I'm getting my terminology right, but a regiment with bolt-ons, as it were, from particular specialists. So you might have 2 para, but with additional assistance from specialists, artillery, armoured vehicles, that sort of thing. And that would be a battle group.
Yeah, that's right. So a battalion would just be, in that example, in your 2 para example, the infantry element.
Yes.
To make it a battle group, you add those elements to it.
Thank you. Going further up, Task Force Helmand, what would that be?
So that was based on a brigade, so the level above that, normally commanded by a 1-star brigadier.
When looking at the staff work and that relationship between the battle group and then the headquarters, how does that sit within the hierarchy of planning? So if we think about right at the top, you'd have a Chief of the Defence Staff Directive, which would be the strategic overview. You'd go down through Chief of Joint Operations and PGHQ, and then would it be down to the brigade at tactical level, and then below that, the battle group?
That's right.
And so all this operational staff work and the reports and returns at the end of it will be going up and down those chains of command.
Yes.
At paragraph 19, you explain the main body of an operation order and how that's meant to be read and understood. Could you just explain what you mean by that?
So, in order to keep it manageable and understood, the main body of an operations order would contain the key information which we felt that everybody needed to have an understanding of. And then you would put in annexes that were much more detailed, that were focused at specific staff branches. If we go back to the staff branches we were talking about before. So a good example would be a J6 annex talking about the communications plan in detail would be targeted at J6 staff further elsewhere in the chain of command. Whereas the overview of the communications plan would be expected to be found in the main body.
So everybody should either read or have disseminated to them the main body of the op order, but the annexes, which would be particular to a particular branch, are likely only to be read by those branches.
That's right.
How is it ensured that those people who need to read the annexes read the annexes?
So the op order would be communicated as a single entity, and on receipt, the relevant staff branches would read the main body, but then go straight to their annex. And in further planning, because in this sense the operation order is to generate further action or further planning, they would be contributing that element into that further planning.
So it's understood the way operational orders work. Everybody reads the main body, and then you turn to your own specific item of interest.
Yeah, so, yes, that's right.
You're going to help us with a typical planning cycle for a battle group deliberate operation in the context that we've just described, so working from an order all the way down. And there are set steps that are taken, is that right?
That's right, often known as the combat estimate.
Often known as, the common estimate.
Combat
estimate. And would it start with the planning group of the battle group HQ?
Yes, it would.
And then, as you've described, the various different members of the HQ responsible for specific aspects would be involved in their aspects.
Yes.
All right, so can you take us through, please, the cycle, just to explain how it starts, how it works. And I think you start with stage 1, which is developing understanding.
That's right. So we break it down into 7 questions. You might find it referred to as the 7 questions, but there is now a question 0. So you could...
So it's in fact 8 questions.
Well, it's known as the 7 questions.
Okay. But we start with question 0.
We start with question 0.
Right.
So questions 0 to 3 are about making sure there's an understanding of the challenge in front of us, of the whatever it is we're being asked to do. And that breaks down into these 4 questions. So question 0, which is about making sure that people have got the right papers, the right understanding, the right maps, for example, going back to your point that the op order has been received by the relevant staff branches and that they have what they need to be able to conduct the planning, and to make sure that people know the construct of the organisation known as the task organisation of the formation that you're planning for.
Okay, so question 0 is basically gathering all the information you need in order to start the process.
That's right.
Okay. And then question 1.
So question 1, the question is, what is the situation and how does it affect me? And it's designed to provide an understanding of the relevant environmental context, physical, human and information context of the problem at hand and the specific recommendations for the commander. And then it breaks down normally into the battle group engineer looking at the ground element, studying maps, overlays, looking at routes, obstacles, vulnerable points. And that might include analysis of how meteorological conditions might affect the operation. And then on the battalion intelligence officer, preparing map overlays of in previous insurgent activity, known locations, distribution patterns, and formulate an assessment of how the insurgents or the adversary and civilians may react to their operation. And from this, one then identifies if there are information gaps and begin to formulate a list of critical information requirements and an intelligence collection plan.
Okay, so question 1 is where the operation is going to be carried out and what the conditions are that you're going to be operating in, and then forecasting what the enemy threat is and what you're likely to be met with, and risks, and importantly here, civilian reaction to the operation. So understanding the entire context of your likely operation.
That's right.
Any gaps are then identified, and then moving on to question 2, what's the next step?
So the question 2 is, what have I been told to do and why? And this is normally a command-led stage where the commander makes sure they understand and identify specified and implied tasks in the direction from higher headquarters, and that they can then, so they can draw out missions and tasks that they've been given and any constraints within which they may operate.
Okay, so we've got the baseline information, we've got the operation and the context it's going to be conducted in, and then it's about understanding why the operation is required.
That's right. And specifically what you've been told to do to seek to achieve.
Question 3. What effects do I need to achieve and what direction must I give to develop the plan?
That's right. So the commander then reviews and confirms the results from question 1 and question 2, including the information requirements, assumptions, freedoms, constraints, and then they give to the staff effects, so military effects that wish to be imposed in the human, information and physical dimensions. And what the commander would then seek to do is to identify their intent and their draft main effort in order to give planning direction to the staff.
So questions 2 and 3 are commander-led.
Yes.
That two-way process of briefing up and briefing down, where does briefing up fit into this set of questions?
So one would expect, hopefully at the end of question 3, an opportunity for that commander to then back brief the higher commander to confirm that their understanding has been correct of the orders that have been received, although that may have happened at the very beginning in a thing that we call the receipt of orders brief, which is confirming that understanding, and then would discuss with the commander their broad outline of how they intended to address the issue at hand to make sure that it fitted in with that higher commander's intent.
Right, so we've got a check, as it were, here to make sure that the commander is on the right lines.
That's right.
Stage 2 is where we go to next, questions 4 to 7. And what do the staff do once the commander has answered questions 2 and 3?
So they take that intent and the draft main effort and the effects schematic, and they develop options for reaching those objectives on behalf of the commander.
And so is this essentially a joint exercise by all of those staff groups that are involved? So J2, J5, they'll all be working on this plan together?
Absolutely. So normally coordinated by the Battle Group Chief of Staff, you would expect each of those staff branches to focus on their areas while being brought together to fuse options for solving the problem at hand.
I'm going to come back to the Battle Group Chief of Staff in a minute when we've got through the questions. But you've got the plans being formulated. Where do we go after that?
So there are then questions 4 to 7 that help to refine that plan to shape it to make sure that you've addressed each of the major considerations and to help you develop those planning options.
All right, so question 4 is where can I best accomplish each action and effect? So that's refining the plan and making sure that it's the best plan you can come up with.
That's right. So the next 4 questions look at where, the resourcing required, how you might synchronise it, and then any constraints and control measures that you need to put on.
Right, so question 5 is resourcing. What resources do I need to accomplish each action or effect? Question 6, where and when do the actions effects take place in relation to each other? Is that, what's that question aimed at? So resourcing is quite clear, what assets you need, how you're going to actually carry it out with what resources, but what's question 6 aimed at?
So I would say there are 2 main elements, one of which is to make sure that things happen in the order that you want them to take place in. And the second is that one may well find is that when you've looked at resourcing, you need more than you've got. And one way of solving that is to echelon it and synchronise it and in that sense, sequence it.
And the importance of these questions will depend on the scale of the operation. So
Yes.
a very large operation involving a large proportion of the battle group would probably require more resources, more consideration of this, rather than a small subunit operation, which is going to be a much smaller group of people.
Yes.
Question 7, what control measures do I need to impose? What's question 7 aimed at, please?
Question 7 is designed to make sure that the plan is both effective and safe in terms of being able to enable the command and control of forces on the ground.
So control measures are things like airspace management. So making sure that your air assets are in the right place at the right time and they're deconflicted with other air assets. Boundaries, making sure you're not operating outside your area of operation.
Yes.
Rules of engagement. When you said the operation is lawful, were you referring to rules of engagement?
Yes.
You go in your statement to describe this as an iterative process considered throughout the combat estimate, but it's the particular focus of question 7. What do you mean by this being an iterative process?
So as people are going through the earlier questions, you'd expect them to be starting to identify where boundaries, for example, might be, but it's this question that really forces you back to look at that in detail and make sure it's been properly considered and finished off as part of the plan.
What about rules of engagement? When would they be considered?
So rules of engagement would be a factor that was overarching to the entire plan. It would be more of a regulation that you applied on any plan that you were going to have. So this wouldn't include options that did or didn't consider the rules of engagement, for example. That would be taken as an absolute given.
Right, so rules of engagement are a sort of central tenet throughout the planning process.
Yes.
They would depend on the type of operation it is as to what rules of engagement you'd be needing to put in place.
Yes. Sorry, just to clarify, one would expect to be given the rules of engagement for the theatre, not to be able to pick it for in a battle group sense in this planning operation, just to be clear.
So you would be given the rules of engagement for the theatre,
Yes.
but not all rules of engagement will apply to all operations. So, for example, a kinetic strike, for example, would have different rules of engagement for a ground operation.
Well, they would still take place within the overarching rules of engagement they'd have to be compliant with the respective rules of engagement.
With the rules of engagement as an entirety, but not all particular aspects of the rules of engagement would be appropriate or applicable to every operation, is the only point I'm making. So there might be a rule of engagement which is applicable to air assets, and this might be a ground operation.
Perhaps, yeah.
So whilst pick and choosing might not be the right phraseology, but you would have to consider which specific parts of the rules of engagement apply to the specific operation.
I think at the level we're talking about here, it would be really clear the rules of engagement under which you are operating.
All right, so if there was any consideration of which ones, it would be higher up at the higher headquarters.
Perhaps.
Step 3, communicating the plan. So
Yes.
we've been through our 7 questions. Does that mean there is now a plan in place? And by communicating, is that cascading it throughout the battle group?
Yes.
And how is that done?
So that's done through a set of orders, an operation order with sections or supporting annexes, as we described below to the to the relevant staff branches, and it would be written by the relevant planning group who are responsible for that staff branch, and then that would be communicated down into the battle group in the most appropriate way.
And what sort of ways would that be communicated? What options are there for the most appropriate way?
So that could be in a written direction. It could, which could go out electronically to be read. It could be communicated face to face if the operation, if things allowed, and it could be sent by radio, for example.
Okay. At paragraph 39 of your witness statement, you describe that in parallel, a concept of operations briefing would be prepared for submission to the Task Force Helmand HQ. Is that often called CONOPS?
That's right.
Can you take us through, please, how a CONOPS works, who drafts it, what's included, where it goes?
Yes, of course. So the written orders would contain a lot of detail. The CONOPS would be used to back brief the Task Force Helmand headquarters as to what the battle group would be doing, where and when. It would be focused on the mission, the scheme of manoeuvre and main effort, and then the key timings and essential control measures, not have all the detail that would need to go down to enable those enacting it to do that.
So is it a summary of the key elements of the operation to enable it to be briefed clearly and decisively to those who are going to be carrying out the operation?
That's right.
And in terms of the back brief to TFHQ, what's the purpose of that?
So the purpose is to enable that headquarters to identify any wider issues beyond the battle group's own area of operations that might need to be taken into consideration. For example, the allocation of additional assets or deconfliction, and more generally, for that headquarters to satisfy itself that the operation was in line with the direction and overall concept for the conduct of the campaign.
Okay, so there's been back briefing throughout the planning stage, through the 7 questions. By the time we've got to the concept of operations, it's back briefed again to ensure, first of all, that there's no practical difficulties with assets or things like deconfliction, but also it's a double check again to make sure that that operation is in line with TFH's direction.
Yes.
If it wasn't in line with TFH's direction or the overall concept for the conduct of the campaign, as you've described, what would happen to that ConOps?
So the operation as planned could be cancelled or changed or delayed to make sure that it was.
So it's got to be approved by TFH, essentially.
Absolutely.
Would Commander TFH or principal staff officers visit the battle group to discuss an operation?
They would if that was practical.
Would it also?
And depending on the scale of what we're talking about, not every time.
I was going to ask, it would depend on the scale of the operation.
Absolutely.
We're looking at this in the context of Afghanistan, but is this basic procedure when it comes to planning an operation across the army?
Yes.
In relationship to this, is there a hierarchy here? You've got orders, rules of engagement, and ConOps. Is that a hierarchy in a sense, and how do those 3 concepts work together? As Ms. Broom has described, if there's some tension or conflict between them.
So I would say that, for us, orders is a legal order given to confirm the outcome of, to give direction of what you want to happen. For that to be a legal order, it would have to be within the constraints of the rules, or within the regulations of the rules of engagement. A ConOps was really used in the sense we've described it there to brief the higher headquarters to make sure that the plan you were going to see through fitted with the overall intent of the higher commander and made sense, as it were, within the rest of the campaign. So I wouldn't regard ROE to be in that hierarchy in that sense, but more of an overarching, it can't be a legal order if it requires a breach of the rules of engagement.
Thank you.
So.
What you've just been explaining in terms of the back brief to the headquarters, is that known as the commander's back brief across the army, delivered by a subordinate commander to the higher headquarters commander?
Yes.
And that process is designed to do what, please?
So it's to allow subordinates to seek approval for the manner in which they're developing the plan, or now the plan that they have, alongside enabling the high headquarters to ensure there are no elements of that plan that are in conflict with one another, with their own plans at the higher level.
The back brief, would that simply go to the higher headquarters, or in the context of Afghanistan, would it go to ISAF? Would there be a back briefing mechanism, or would it go to other UK force elements? Or is it purely to brief the higher headquarters?
So the intent of that back brief is to brief the high headquarters. If the scale of the operation required it, they could choose to then brief others.
Is there a mechanism for the briefing upwards? If you're in the battle group and you're considering briefing above to your higher headquarters, would you be considering briefing above that, so 1 up, 2 up?
No.
As a phrase? No, you'd always brief your higher headquarters, and
Yes.
then it would be the higher headquarters' responsibility to brief above that.
Yes.
So if there was any briefing up to ISAF level, it would go from the higher headquarters.
Yes.
In terms of other UK force elements, so outside TFH, would there be briefing as part of that commander's back briefing, or would it be up to the commander to decide whether or not there needed to be briefing to other force elements?
I'm not familiar with how those forces operated, I'm afraid.
Okay, so this commander's back briefing is purely to brief the higher headquarters, so they're aware of the operation.
Yes.
Look at delivery of the orders, which you deal with at your paragraph 45 onwards, please.
Yes.
After the CONOPS and the operational order has been approved, what happens, please?
So the orders would then be delivered to subordinate commanders by the command group, which is, as I said, broadly the group that conducted the planning that we've described. And you would expect there to be, at the scale we're talking about, written orders, and perhaps then an in-person meeting if that was possible.
If there was written orders, those who needed to would leave with written copies of that, if that's right. If it was an oral briefing, people would have to remember what they were doing.
So at battle group level, I would expect that, and for complex battle group operations, one would expect to find written orders and then a verbal briefing and a repeat of the process we've just described in terms of commander's back brief from those subordinate commanders going back. So that the system to be replicated at that next level of command.
Is there ever a situation where there would be simply oral orders, or would you always expect orders to be in writing, no matter what the level?
No, I wouldn't always expect there to be written orders at all.
Right, so there could be a situation where orders are given before the operation, but orally to perhaps a smaller group of individuals who are going to carry out that operation.
Yes.
Before we go on to the execution of an operation, where you've been describing deliberate operations of some scale involving the battle group, but you've already explained that there would be a different level of detail needed depending on the scale of the operation. Some would require written orders, and as you've just said, some would be simply oral orders. What would be the situation where a part of the battle group is conducting the same sort of operation on a repeated basis? So we'll take the example of a detention operation or a cordon and search operation carried out on a regular schedule, often multiple times a week. How would the planning of those operations fit within this stage, given it's the same sort of operation, albeit in a different location with perhaps a different target?
So I can't talk about sort of specific examples of who did what, but one can see that familiarity with the type of problem enables one to focus on certain elements of the planning cycle that mean that you would over time do it more quickly and focus on those areas that were particularly important for that operation.
So it might be it's the same type of operation but in a different location, so the terrain might be something that's more important at the planning stage. The intelligence is likely to be important across any operation, regardless of whether it's the same type of problem.
Yes, it is.
And would you expect, therefore, the planning cycle to be truncated and to be quicker where it's a repeat type of operation?
Yes, one would expect when something is simple, straightforward, involves small numbers, or where you are familiar, then you could truncate the planning cycle.
Truncate, does that mean skip out sections of it, or are you always expected to go through those 7 questions and through the planning, the dissemination and the delivery of the orders?
You would expect, they're a handrail, not an order, as it were. So you'd expect commanders and staff to understand where to focus their effort through it, and use it as a checklist to make sure that the relevant factors were considered.
Moving on to the execution of the operation. The execution of an operation you've described begins when committed assets physically enact their issued orders. An execution is a continuous activity for the duration of the operation, and it comprises two key functions, command and control. Can you please explain what you mean by those two key functions?
Yes, so command is the authority vested in an individual to make specific decisions, and they have control over major changes to the plan, whereas control is the business of the staff to make sure that the orders are being complied with and to help the operation run smoothly.
You go on to say that control is an ongoing operation vested in the J3 branch, often under the direction of the Chief of Staff.
Yes.
So the role of the Chief of Staff, please. The title may be obvious, but could you explain in a battle group what the job of the Chief of Staff is, what they are responsible for more generally, and then specifically on an operation?
So the battle group Chief of Staff is normally the battalion 2IC, the battalion second in command from the main unit in the battle group. So that by default, they're normally a senior major in this circumstance. And their job is to oversee the staff planning functions that we've been describing, make sure that they work effectively and efficiently within the headquarters, and to make sure that their various contributions are being fused effectively.
And that's across the headquarters, not just on operations. So if they're overseeing the staff branches, they're overseeing personnel and finance and all the other aspects, as well as the planning of operations.
Yes.
How does the relationship between the commander and the Chief of Staff work? You've described the Chief of Staff as second in command. If the commander is out on an operation or deployed, what's the role of the Chief of Staff in that circumstance?
So they're to if we go back to the separation of command and control, they're in charge of the control element, normally from the main headquarters, whereas the commander may well have deployed out on the ground in what we call a tactical headquarters. And so they're making sure that the planning products from the planning cycle we've described, so synchronization matrices, the boundaries we've discussed, that those are all running smoothly to make sure the operation runs smoothly.
Would you expect the Chief of Staff to have a good understanding of what was going on the ground on any operation?
Yes.
And in terms of where he would be situated, he or she would be situated during a live operation, where would they be?
So I'd expect them to be in the battle group main headquarters.
And would they be in the ops room watching, or would they be in their own office? Would they be updated?
I'd expect them during the execution of an operation, such as we're having talking about here, to be in the operations room.
And in the operations room, who would be with them?
So you'd expect to have the staff branches that we've been discussing represented, and to be running an ops table with the plan of the execution of the operation out in front of them, with a battle captain, so a number of staff around that who've got various functions to track, monitor the battle, and to make sure that the appropriate reports and returns are being sent.
Right, so the Chief of Staff is in the ops room overseeing the operation with the relevant staff members who are following the course of the operation to ensure that it goes according to plan.
Yes.
In terms of the information he'd have access to, what sort of information was generally available in the ops room on any deliberate operation? So
you'd expect to have all the relevant products from the planning process we've described displayed in some way. So the boundary traces to be marked on a map, a synchronization matrix to be at hand, for example, and then information would come into them from those out on the ground, normally via, in a tactical operation like this, via the radio. And so you'd have the radio nets coming in, monitored and run by signallers, but often broadcast into the headquarters, or the key net broadcast into the headquarters.
And if there was any footage, say forward motion video or anything like that, would that be relayed into the ops room?
It could be.
And this would be live radio feed, would it?
Absolutely so, yes.
Would it be JChat?
So you're familiar with JChat, sir, so someone has to type it. So it may be that it's at battle group level that it gets first put into JChat from listening to the radio nets and then putting it straight in. Or it may be that that's happened at a lower level, and so you're getting both voice and JChat coming into the headquarters, sir.
Live?
Yes, sir, yes.
Or relatively quickly?
Absolutely, yeah. In as close to real time as one can.
Thank you.
There's a careful planning process which is scrutinised at the various stages. The operation is approved, the orders, the CONOPS are briefed down, the operation is executed. What happens if things don't go to plan? How does the commander, the chief of staff, how do you plan for that and then respond to it?
So through planning, one may have developed con plans, contingency plans, where you had identified through that process we've described that something that could affect the plan, and therefore you could then enact that con plan. If that situation developed, you could then enact that con plan, or you can handle it dynamically. If it's something that you hadn't foreseen, you can handle it dynamically, and those functions of command and control would still sit as the overall responsibilities of those parties.
Right, so there might be something which you've foreseen, there's a weather front coming in, it comes in quicker than you anticipate. You've got to take a decision as to whether you can carry on.
Yep.
Or something happens on the ground, an unexpected contact, for example, and then that would be up to the commander on the ground and the chief of staff between them to work out essentially what to do.
Yes. Not just the chief of staff, the team, but yes, the two respective headquarters.
The respective headquarters, but the team feeding into the chief of staff
Absolutely.
is the person who actually sits at the top in this context.
Absolutely, Marmia.
You then explain that the battle group would update TFH formally. So you explained that they'd be compiling the reports and returns that were required during the operation. So what would they be doing? What sorts of reports and returns would they be compiling?
So in the first instance, you'd expect to hear contact reports, for example, if there was a contact as you described, and that being immediately reported on JChat or on the radio on the most appropriate means. But the more formal ones, you'd expect at the end to have an intelligence summary, a situation report being produced to make sure that people were certain. And if it was a major operation, you'd expect there to be a back brief at the end of that. In terms of probably a sort of summary of execution, how did it go, and to ensure that lessons were learned.
Is summary of execution shortened to anything? We've got concept of operations to CONOPS. Is a summary of execution an EXSUM?
It might be the one thing we don't really shorten.
That seems surprising, I have to say. But that's a summary of execution. And it sets out, does it, the key events in chronological format with any supporting information or assessment?
That's right.
And again, depending on the scale and scope of the operation, that might be a lot of information or relatively simple information.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry, you cover JChat in paragraph 51.
Sir.
Thank you.
So just looking at some of the specific types of OSW in use during a campaign such as Operation Herrick, directives, which you explain at paragraph 55 of your witness statement, used at the higher levels of command. Those are the CDS directives that we discussed earlier, for example, and then going down through plans and then down to orders as you've described throughout that planning process. At paragraph 57, you say the central feature of OSW in any context is that it reflects the type of operation being undertaken and the force element that's undertaking it. And then you draw attention to three particular aspects of the context of ground operations in Afghanistan, which you say are relevant. First of all, what do you mean by OSW is that the central feature of OSW is that it reflects the type of operation being undertaken and the force that's undertaking it? Is it just as simple as some OSW is relevant to some operations and not to others?
Absolutely.
And again, some OSW would be relevant to a particular force element but not relevant to others?
Yes.
In terms of the three features of the Afghanistan conflict, can you take us through those briefly and explain why they're relevant?
Yes. So first, it was a high-intensity counterinsurgency and stabilisation campaign conducted alongside and partnering with Afghan government forces. So our overall general approach that we've been describing in operational planning and decision-making, which had been developed over many years, was then adjusted to make sure it was appropriate for that environment. Perhaps the example, a pertinent example would be that question one used to be about what is the enemy doing, and we changed it to be much more what is the situation, to reflect the broad nature of the campaign as opposed to a peer-on-peer conflict. It would be
Okay, so although the 7 questions are familiar to all theatres because of the type of the counterinsurgency campaign, the high intensity of it, it was adjusted to make sure that it worked in that context.
And it's actually something we've carried through.
You say in this particular context there was a greater emphasis upon understanding the civilian population and an adoption of some NATO ISAF reporting formulas.
Yes.
So again, those particular features filtered into the OSW.
Yes.
In understanding the civilian population, what do you mean by that?
I mean that as a counterinsurgency operation, the primary outcome you're trying to achieve is focused on the civilian population, and therefore understanding the impacts and effects of a specific operation on that local, and then to a degree, albeit not so much at this level, that then the national picture.
So, for example, in what the inquiry is concerned with night raids, ISAF described them as night raids, but we're looking at DDOs. Understanding the impact of night raids upon the civilian population was of significant importance in this conflict.
So understanding the impact of any of our operations on the civilian population was important.
Adoption of some NATO ISAF reporting formats. What do you mean by that?
So because it was an ISAF-ran campaign, one would try to make sure that, and probably really hear from TFH level, but not only actually, it was also at a lower level, that one was compliant in using formats that would be understood by, easily interpreted and understood by other forces across the ISAF force.
So this, because it wasn't just a national campaign, there was that synchronisation with the ISAF reporting procedures as well.
Yes.
Your second point is the cycle of force elements, and that force elements were deployed on a 6-month rotation. Why was that relevant?
Because each of the brigades that were the foundation of TFH would have trained up themselves and therefore might have had minor variations in battle rhythms and associated reporting depending on what they developed in their build-up training.
But these are minor variations. The standard procedures should be followed.
Yes.
And then there was a wide range of operational taskings over and above the ordinary difference between various arms and services. So is that just the breadth of operations that were undertaken in Afghanistan would affect the different types of OSW?
Yes.
At Annex A of your witness statement, you set out some of the principal forms of OSW in use during the relevant period. And I'm not going to take you through that list. It's set out very helpfully and will be on the website if anybody wishes to look at it. But we'll come on in due course a little later on to something called assess reps. And I just wondered if you could help us with assess reps. They're listed on your schedule, paragraph 41. But were they a regular piece of operational staff work carried out and completed on a regular basis?
I think regular but not routine, so they weren't on a sometimes they might be as a routine basis. Sorry, let me start that again. They might be on a routine basis, but it might be that after an operation you choose in a sort of a pause to, rather than just giving a sit rep, to slightly just sort of take breath and provide an assess rep.
And what would an assess rep contain?
It would provide an overview of the state of affairs within the organisation.
So it's not just about a particular operation, it's about the organisation as a whole.
It could be more broadly, yes.
And if they were on a fixed rotation, what sort of fixed rotation would they be? Would they be daily, weekly, monthly, deployment?
It could vary between headquarters, but one might expect it to be daily.
Can we turn, please, now to consequence management? So we've planned and executed the operation. What is consequence management?
So consequence management is a description for the steps that might be taken following an incident involving the injury or death of any local person or the damaging of property.
Right, so there's been an operation, it's been executed, and there has potentially been injury, death, or damage. Is consequence management a term that's always been used by the British Army?
It's something that really gained currency during the course of Operation Herrick.
And why did it gain currency as part of Operation Herrick? Was it a Herrick phrase?
Sorry,
Was it a Herrick phrase or was it an ISAF phrase?
I don't know if it went beyond Herrick. Sorry, that's not to say. So consequence management was an ISAF term.
I was going to say, because in paragraph 61...
Sorry, I misheard. I realised as I was speaking.
No, that's all right. It's my fault. Not an established part of UK doctrine, but was used by ISAF as a general description for steps that might need to be taken following an incident involving those things you've described.
Yes.
What did it include in a UK context?
So it included UK defence protocols for reporting and follow-up on fatal accidents which were actual, suspected or reported, and near misses affecting UK service personnel and or civilians, and where notable damage to property had occurred.
All right, so what was the first step to be taken in respect of all serious incidents involving UK personnel and assets, including shooting incidents? And this starts at paragraph 64 of your witness statement.
Yes, thank you. So serious incident reports, or SINC reps, were produced to report all serious incidents that we've just described, and PGHQ provided a guidance list, although not exhaustive, of what this would be.
You've provided, as your exhibit MC2, the PGHQ standing operating procedure for incident reporting, is that right?
Yes.
Could I ask, please, that we turn to exhibit MC2 and we start at page 2, please? this is the standing operating procedure, and we're going to come back to the details of that in a moment. But you described guidance on the type of incident, and is that set out, please, at page 4? It's page A1, sir, in your MC2.
Thank you.
So incident reporting guide, and there are 29 MC2, page 4, page A1. The following should be used as a guide and should not be considered exhaustive to the type of incident that merits a formal incident report within 2 hours. But is this the guide that you were talking about?
Yes.
And so we have death or very serious injury of British service personnel or coalition troops. Number 2, any claims that British forces or coalition units under UK command have killed any other person or persons or involved directly or indirectly in an incident where casualties have occurred. Does that include allegations of civilian casualties?
Yes.
Moving down, paragraph 10. Occurrence is likely to arouse public or service interest. So again, that could include allegations of civilian casualties or breaches of the rules of engagement.
Sorry, you're asking me, sorry.
Yes, 10. Occurrence is likely to arouse public or service interest. Could that include civilian casualties or allegations that the rules of engagement have been breached on an operation?
In my view, yes.
13. Any incident that might draw public attention to covert operations or activities of special forces. So these are 3 parts of the guide where a sync rep would be required. And would you expect commanders to order sync reps in those circumstances?
Yes.
If we look at some of the detail, please, we go back to, it's page 1 in the internal pagination, page 2 in the document. We start with the first paragraph. All UK forces deployed on operations under CJO's OPCOM are to adopt a common protocol for incident reporting. As far as you know, does this apply to every operational theatre?
As far as I know, yes.
And therefore all force elements within those operational theatres?
Under CJS's operational command, yes.
So it sets out in the background, second sentence, although not exhaustive, Annex A provides guidance on the type of incident that is deemed to warrant a full sync rep. And in summary, it goes on to describe that it's necessary to report incidents which might not directly involve UK troops or assets. It may have a bearing on the UK's deployed force elements, pre-deployment training, campaign design, and it provides context and insight. So it's quite wide, the circumstances, given those 29 examples, but there's a very broad description of when a sync rep would be required.
Yes.
Paragraph 3, you have quoted in your witness statement, because paragraph 3 on the same page, incident reporting is a commander's responsibility. And a judgment is required in identifying incidents that should be reported. What is often perceived as a minor incident in theatre can have a high profile in the UK for a variety of reasons. As a guide, if there is uncertainty whether an incident should be reported to PJHQ, it's better to do so than not. So the guidance is to err on the side of caution. Is that right?
Yes.
It goes on to specify to inform the chain of command, incidents should be reported verbally. And then paragraph 4 explains that although it may be that the actual facts are incomplete, that the person reporting doesn't have the full picture, that doesn't matter, updates should be provided, but that doesn't stop the need to report immediately. Is that right?
Yes.
If we go over to page 6 in the document, which is enclosure 1, the aim of this document is to provide details for completing sync reps. The purpose of the sync rep is to advise higher authority supporting commands and subordinates of any random event that may occur without warning and which may have operational, political and/or media consequences. Sync reps are to be received by PGHQ within 2 hours of an incident. So a very quick turnaround time. So something has happened on an operation, forces get back to base, and the sync rep either will have been completed or will have to be completed.
Yes.
The next page sets out the details that should be included. And over the page, the very final page, is a pro forma form. So these are set out very clearly what's needed, when it's required, and when by.
Yes.
And that's within 2 hours.
The initial sync rep, so yes.
Would that be within 2 hours of returning?
It's with 2 hours of the incident,
Of the incident, sir.
Of the instant?
according to the template.
Yeah.
So that could mean that the individuals who carried out the operation are still on their way back to base. They might not have made it back.
Yes, I mean, it could be still on running, absolutely.
So if something happened in the middle of an operation, would the sync rep still be required within 2 hours?
Yes.
At paragraph 67, you explain that typically a sync rep would be prepared at subunit HQ and passed up the chain of command through battle group HQ to TF headquarters and on to PGHQ. So again, that reporting upwards. It says that Commander TAFH could pass this on to the National Component Commander or Air Component Commander as required. Now, the National Component Commander, was that the 3-star General Deputy Commander ISAF?
Yes.
They'd also pass such reports up to the Regional Command South, West HQ, the higher headquarters, and so the incident and associated data was collected by ISAF civilian casualties teams. So the sync reps are briefed upwards and they're briefed across to ISAF, so everyone's aware where there's an issue.
Yes.
If there was a shooting incident after the sync rep, what would happen?
So if there is a shooting incident after that, there were one of 3 steps that could be taken, which I can describe if that would help.
Thank you.
So there were 3 criteria or characteristics. One was if there were only positively identified enemy forces that had been killed or injured, and there were no grounds to suggest a breach of law or ROE, then the incident would be recorded in that sync rep, but no shooting incident review was then required. Secondly, if information indicated that civilians had been killed or injured by UK forces or other nations' forces under UK command, but there were no grounds on the basis of the facts available at the time to suspect a breach of law or ROE, then the commanding officer of the unit involved was required to initiate a shooting incident report. And finally, if it was immediately apparent that there had been a breach of law or ROE, or friendly forces had been killed or injured, or if any other circumstances made it appropriate, the commanding officer was to ensure that the service police were made aware at the earliest opportunity.
So there's a hierarchy with an SIR, and there would be no SIR, so no escalation required where only a positively identified enemy force member had been killed or injured.
Yes.
But the words positively identified, if there was any doubt over that, an SIR should be conducted.
Yes.
If the information indicated initially that civilians had been killed or injured, then an SIR was required.
Yes.
If that initial information suggested that those civilians had been killed or injured in breach of the rules of engagement. So, for example, if there was an allegation that the person who, let's say, shot the civilian was not acting in self-defence, then that should mean the service police are made aware as soon as possible.
That's right. And then that service police investigation would take precedence over a shooting incident report. They didn't run concurrently.
And if an SIR was ordered, but then information came to light which suggested there had been, for example, a breach of the ROE, would then a service police investigation be initiated? Should a service police investigation be initiated and take precedence again?
Yes.
There was an there was an SIR policy, is that right? In fact, 2 in date during our terms of reference period.
Yes.
You've exhibited those as MC3 and MC4. They are in force on the 4th of January 2010 and then the 12th of July 2011. And we're just going to have a brief look at some of those details. There are changes between the 2 of them. Is that right, Brigadier Cansdale?
There are some.
If we turn to MC3, please, and if we turn to page 4 in the document, and it's the first page of text after the exhibit labels. So this is drafted, we see at paragraph 1, because of the impact of the Armed Forces Act 2006. The opportunity was taken to review the SIR policy, is that right?
That's my understanding, yes.
At paragraph 3, responsibility for compliance with this policy rests with the NCC, so the National Component Commander, Deputy Commander ISAF. But it could be delegated and was routinely delegated to Commander Task Force Helmand, is that right?
Yes.
We see on the copy 2, on the second page, page 5, I'm giving the separate pagination for those working without the page numbers on the document electronically. But we see this is copied to various different parts of the Army, but it's also copied to Special Forces HQ UK Chief of Staff.
Yes.
Over the page, please, to page 6. We see the introduction sets out it's the responsibility and duty of individuals and commanders at all levels to ensure that any use of force is proportionate, reasonable and necessary, and that any shooting incidents are accurately reported, recorded and reviewed.
Yes.
The need to investigate matters where it's alleged that the law and therefore our standards of conduct may have been breached is fundamental, but that's not prejudicing the needs of personnel to be confident to open fire within the relevant law and rules of engagement. So as long as someone is operating within the relevant law and the rules of engagement, there's no difficulty. But this is important because standards have to be upheld, is that right?
Yes.
Must be reported to the chain of command at the earliest opportunity using the SIMREP format. And then it describes the 3 different types of shooting incident you've described. And then if we look at, on page 7, internal pagination 2, shooting incident review, the bold text at the bottom, only where a properly completed SIR provides sufficient assurance to the chain of command as to the lawfulness of action by UK personnel should a service police investigation be discounted. So would it be right to say that the accurate completion of an SIR is fundamental to the decision as to whether or not a service police investigation is warranted?
Yes.
If an SIR is not completed accurately, then those who need to consider in the chain of command whether or not a service police investigation is required will not be able to do so accurately.
Yes, they need sufficient assurance, absolutely.
And so fundamentally, an SIR is a very important document when it comes to investigating and reporting on alleged instances of the breach of the rules of engagement or civilian casualties.
I agree.
It makes it clear that an SIR is not a disciplinary investigation. It's to establish the facts of what happened. Is that right?
Yes.
Over the page, at page 8 or internal page 3, paragraph 13, nothing in this policy absolves a commanding officer or alters his responsibilities in law to ensure that the service police are made aware of the possibility of a serious offence or prescribed description. So even though an SIR is being instigated, the duty still remains on a commanding officer to ensure that where there is an allegation which would warrant a service police investigation, that investigation is triggered.
Yes.
Sir, can I just have a moment? We're just noticing the time. I won't be a moment. So we were hoping to finish at worst by 1:30, but I think that's going to be a bit tight, and I know the stenographer's been now typing. If I finish this document and we break as usual and resume at 2, would that meet with your approval?
Indeed, I think we need to give the shorthand writer a bit of a break, but we may take a slightly shorter lunch.
Thank you.
That would work.
Thank you. I'll finish this document.
Thank you.
And then we'll come back at 2:00. Thank you. At Annex B, which is page 9 or page AL5, it sets out further guidance as to how an SIR should be conducted. Is that right, Brigadier Cansdale?
Yes.
And partway through paragraph 1, the simple aim of the SIR is to assist the chain of command in forming a final view as to whether the matter should be reported to the service police. The requirement to secure fresh, accurate and honest recollections of events and to ensure that evidence which may assist the SIR or any subsequent investigation is preserved is paramount. And then again it repeats that only this way will an SIR be able to give the chain of command sufficient assurance. Timing, an SIR should commence at the earliest opportunity and be completed within 48 hours of the incident. And if we go over the page, please, to page 10 or page B2 of AL5, once an SIR has been completed, we see at paragraph 6, there are 3 courses of action open to a commanding officer. If there's an allegation or circumstances that would indicate a Schedule 2 offence has been committed, that would trigger the duty to report to the service police. The CO must report to the service police. The CO may inform the service police of an alleged service offence which falls outside the scope of subpara A, or he may choose to investigate that himself. Where a commanding officer believes that a service police investigation is not required because there are no grounds to suspect that a criminal act has or may have been committed by service personnel or the ROE breached, he may propose to the higher authority that matter is not reported to the service police. But there's an additional check, as it were, after the completion of the SIR to make sure that there are no grounds to suspect that a criminal act has or may have been committed. At paragraph 8, consideration of the prospects for successful prosecution or the service interest are irrelevant to any recommendation or decision whether to report the matter to the service police. Once an SIR has been completed, a commanding officer has to be certain that reporting it to the service police is not required. And if there is any doubt about either the facts or what's happened, then on reading this, is it right that a service police referral should be made?
If there's doubt, yes.
If we just look at Appendix 1 to Annex B, which is page 15 on the electronic version, and page B1-1, there's a guidance on documents to be collated. And so here it's set out what items should be collated. It's not an exhaustive list, but it goes through details, post-mission reports, fire planning and targeting information, patrol reports, ops room log, radio log, battalion watchkeepers log, sync reps, list of witnesses, and the like. It's a thorough inquiry into what happened. Is that right, Brigadier Cansdale?
Yes.
And then over the page again, there's further guidance and particular headings which need to be included, and then parts of the SR which need to be referred to the League Ad for advice and the service police. So it's all set out for a commanding officer. There's guidance, there's an outline of what must be done in certain circumstances, and then there's essentially a pro forma at the end.
Yes.
We'll come on to MC4 after lunch. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Broom. We'll break now, please, until 2 o'clock. And Brigadier, as I say to all witnesses, please do not discuss your evidence with anybody during the break.
Sir.
You'll be escorted back to your room. Thank you very much. 2 o'clock, please.